Hi everyone, Dave Jeffers from Dave Jeffers Artists, going live. Hope you can see all this. Here we are. That should give you a pretty good view of it. Hopefully I stay out of the way enough. We'll turn this a little bit, get this a little bit closer. Let me make some adjustments here on the fly. That's a little bit better. I think that'll work. As long as I stay out of my own way, we're all set. All right. Well, I had told you this painting was done, but then I decided to turn it the other way. Because people told me right here there's a face of a beautiful lady, an eye, kind of a nose, a mouth, and a hand coming up. So she's kind of adjusting her hair. So I'm going to make a few changes to this, since others pointed out that it kind of looks like a lady. And it wasn't intended that way. I call these abstractions rhythmic. I mean, I'm just trying to build a rhythm within the painting, but I wasn't trying to capture anything in particular, such as a person's face. But now that I know that everyone is seeing that, we'll do a little more to make it recognizable here as a person. And again, joining me live for the first time here, so one of my first broadcasts anyway, this is oil paint that I'm using. In fact, I'm using a new brush. This is pretty cool. I'm enjoying this brush already. I had one like this years ago and wore it out, and for some reason, never bothered to replace it. So today I was getting a canvas and found out that they had just the brush I wanted, and so here we go. I love the flexibility of this brush. It gives you such different abilities. One of the reasons I really do love this brush is you can come to a point very quickly with it without a whole lot of effort. Now, let's have a look. Like I said, when I started this painting, it wasn't to be anything. I don't start any of my rhythmic abstracts really with an idea of a subject in mind, like a person or an animal or anything like that. I'll show you my process later. I'm going to make a video on that too, is how I start these. A lot of oil painters will tell you what they do is put a black, before they start painting, they put a gray background over the whole thing. In other words, they don't draw on or paint on a white canvas. That seems to spook a lot of people. And I used to do it all the time. It never really bothered me. I don't know, some people, I can understand why it would. Sometimes looking at that blank canvas can be pretty intimidating. Especially if you're not quite sure what you want to do. There's an old cartoon type thing that Norman Rockwell made. And it shows him in front of a blank canvas, and you can tell he's perplexed as to what he's going to paint. And I really admired Norman Rockwell. I admired the way he worked, and that he didn't just guess most of the time. He hired actual artists and brought them in, dressed them up. So instead of just wondering if that's the way it would look, he wanted to know exactly how things look. So if he had a little boy with a baseball cap, he went and found a little boy, bought a baseball cap. He had a bunch of costumes in his studio, and he would dress them up, make, preliminary drawings and see how the boy was going to look, and then would kind of do an oil painting sketch on his canvas, and from there, away he would go. Of course, when you're Norman Rockwell, he probably could have done it from memory. He's one of the most talented painters and capturers of character I've ever seen, when I've ever witnessed on canvas. And that's saying a lot, because there's a lot of artists that I really, really enjoy. I get asked a lot, who were my influences when painting? I remember when I first got into art, there was a painter called Leroy Neiman. It was during the Olympic Games, I think in the 80s, and a lot of his artwork was being featured. But it wasn't just a picture of someone running a marathon. This person would be electrified with color, and you could almost feel the motion with the colors he used. And it was exciting. Just like the Olympics are exciting. He found a way to make that work. And he was as much a talk of the Olympics as some of the athletes were. His artwork was just mesmerizing and beautiful to look at. In fact, look up that name, Leroy Neiman. I think I'm pronouncing it right. And see some of the Olympics back in the 80s. And he just immortalized so many of the United States athletes with his ability to just bring it to life. What I'm doing now is just some detail work. Going in and looking for some things. Now, sometimes I like things that look fuzzy or smoky, I'll call it. But sometimes it weakens the whole composition if it's a little too much like that. Like some of these right here, I'm losing them. So I'm going to put a little bit of light there, and I'm going to come back. There we go. Now it makes the dark show up a little bit better. Too many tones, too similar. Let's lighten that up a little bit so that it shows up a little bit better. And if I really want to make it show up, I'm going to do what I'm going to do now. I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to give this a little wiggle, if you want to. That's really what I'm doing to the brush, is wiggling it and blending at the same time. Saves a step. So I do use an outlining technique sometimes in my work. Sometimes. If I really want something to be emphasized. Sometimes I'll add a partial outline. I rarely outline the whole thing because I think it looks a little too cartoonish. And if you're a cartoonist, that's perfect, but if you're not, it can make the art look a little too simple, as far as I'm concerned. So that's not the look I'm looking for. There we go. Just enough to accentuate it a little bit. This painting that I thought would be done pretty quick has wound up being a little bit harder for me to finish, because I'll think I'm done and then I'll look at it, come back in a couple days, which is a good practice to have. If ever you're wondering if your artwork is done, when you think you're done, leave it for a couple days, don't look at it, and then come back and have a look. About 2 days. You've forgotten what most of it looks like, and now you're able to look at it with fresh eyes. And you may see all kinds of things you don't particularly care for. I found that many times when I worked. There we go. One of the people that got me interested in art, and he's picked on a lot, is Bob Ross. But Bob, with his easygoing manner, just entranced me. And how quick he could get something that looked like trees, that looked like grass, that looked like mountains, always amazed me. Yes, more detail is possible and should be gone for. Depends on how you want, but I find that a lot of his work is a good starting point. Like I mentioned, some people use the gray on the canvas first, and then they paint all their values. The idea being the gray gives you a middle tone, and the white can cause you to, kind of misjudge your colors. If you find someone they're using a white canvas, probably a lot of their work, you'll notice, will have a brighter gold to it. A lot of the values will be lighter because they started working with white, and everything gets compared to that white. So every value I do is now going on to white. And even though I may not be trying to do it, and it's not a conscious thing, my mind is figuring out how to adjust to that white. And that way, and sometimes I paint that way on purpose because I want my work to come out better. Knowing that in advance can set you up for success if that's your goal. There we go. When I'm painting, I've mentioned this before, I really am looking at the values, the tones. What else can I call it? The bounce back from between light and dark, the play between light and dark. I'm really not looking for subject matter at all. Now, of course, I do sometimes paint portraits. I'm not great at it because I don't do it enough, but I'm getting better. There was a time I was pretty good at doing. I would draw portraits of people, especially when I was in middle school and high school. And of course, being a boy and having no girlfriend at the time, I drew beautiful women. I'm trying to think who was the one that I drew that you guys would remember. I'll think about it. I don't remember it right now. Very well-known actress at the time. And I think might have been Cheryl Ladd. If you're younger and you're like, who the heck is that? You're going to have to look up Cheryl Ladd. She was a successful model in movies, things like that. Built a pretty good career. As I mentioned before, when I first did this painting, it wasn't intended to be in this orientation, vertical. I had a horizontal look. But when everyone kept seeing the face, and then I looked and said, oh yeah. And I decided to play on that a little bit. So now there is kind of a subject matter. I'm not going to touch any of that. And I'm going to leave most of that alone. I'm just working on some of the mid-level tones down here. Give it a little more bounce. Who knows? Something else may show up. And a lot of times that happens. I have worked on paintings a long time. And, think I'm done. Put it down, let it dry. And then a couple months later, I've gone back and looked, oh, that's not good. Because what you learn, as you learn things, maybe you were in a museum, maybe you took a class, maybe you were watching some videos on YouTube and you found different ways of doing things. And then you look back at your work and go, yeah, that could have been better. That's the good thing about oil paint, though. You can always reactivate it, go back in and work it. And oil paint's good that way. I have brought many an oil painting back to work by using a little bit of thinner and a lot of patience. It's not easy to do once you set it into, once it's dried, but it is possible to reignite it with a little bit of paint thinner. Now, I use paint thinner. I had someone try to get me kind of interested in the oil paints that are water-based. I tried them, but I didn't like the way the water flowed. See, I use a lot of thinner when I'm painting. You can't see that off camera, but I take this brush that I'm using here and I'll put some paint, and a lot of times I will put thinner into it and wipe it on a cloth. So it just has a little bit of thinner and it allows me to blend easier. When you don't do that, you do what I'm doing right now, it takes a little bit more work, but sometimes that gives you another whole effect too. So I like to blend a lot. I just like the way it looks. When I first started oil painting, I copied everything. I think that's the way a lot of us start painting, unless you're some kind of what they call it when you're born with it. And prodigy. Unless you're a prodigy, and I've seen some of those, and I'm still amazed by them. Jealous too, a little bit. The prodigies, they come out of the womb and they seem to be able to paint. I don't know what it is, but it's just amazing. Just amazing. And they just were born to paint. Or they were born to play the piano. And I've seen, kids, and they're 7, 8 years old. Look on YouTube sometime, and they're writing concerts. They're playing the piano, and they don't even know the notes they're playing. My father, even though that wasn't the best influence in my life, had the ability to paint or to play by ear, meaning that he could hear a song and then sit down at a piano or a banjo or a guitar or the drums, and literally in a few minutes he could repeat it back. Even though he had no idea what note he was playing, he had no idea, anything really. He just would touch the piano, some of the keys. It didn't look like he was really doing anything. Randomly just kind of plunking his hands down on the keys. And before you know it, he's playing the song. And it just was weird. And of course, he didn't know how he did it either. Probably if we could research his family, we'd find out there's more like that. No, I didn't get that ability. I've tried. I wish I had. I'd love to be able to play the guitar like he did, just listening to a tune and then repeating it. That would be really, really cool. But nope. But he also could draw and paint. Found out later that he actually wanted to be an artist, but it was just too expensive. My father, like a lot of people from that generation, came from a poor farming family. So going to college not a possibility on what they made. And so he drew his whole life, simple characters. I don't have any of them anymore, but simple representations of people, and he had his own way of doing it. And they weren't exact, but they were kind of like representations, I'll call them that. He didn't worry about big details, but he had a way of drawing people that was almost cartoonish, but not quite. A little bit above cartoonish, but a little bit below some other ways of drawing, if that makes any sense. I wish I had some to show you, but they're long gone. There we go. Bring that out a little bit. Hope you can see what I'm doing over here. I'm just darkening this a little bit and getting the shapes I want. I love getting different shapes in my painting. It's one of the joys of painting. Is this canvas, you can create anything you want. Bob Ross used to say it, I think best. You are in charge of this canvas. It was given to you. What you do with it is all up to you. On this canvas, you're almost like a god. Because I'm creating, and I can erase or create, go back and forth, do whatever I want, and it's 100% up to me. And that's kind of cool. It's hard to get control in life. But on this, when you're painting or drawing or whatever, or sculpting, whatever your art form is, you are in charge. You might be able to hear that. I'm going into some thinner now. And I am going to, there we go, blend that out so that it goes into the next color and just disappears. Almost like it's a shadow. So where did I get this painting from, this way of painting? I've been doing painting like this, or drawing actually, since I was a kid. I would sit down and draw designs, I'll call them. And they didn't have anything particular. They weren't of anything you could really tell. They were just representations. They were just different tones, kind of like I'm doing now. I didn't have any equipment, so it was always usually a number 2 pencil, sometimes a pen, the old Bic pens. And that's how it started. And I was very young then, really didn't think of myself as an artist. I was just doodling. That's what the teachers called it. You're doodling again, Mr. Jeffers. That's my last name. Quit doodling and pay attention in class. I probably was a pain in the butt to these poor teachers. I wasn't much of a student, especially in my early years. I got better as I went along, but in the early years, didn't care much about that. But got better later. So this is a pretty big painting, 24 by 36, big enough. As you can see some of my videos on, check out YouTube, Dave Jeffers Artist on YouTube. And on here too, you see my studio isn't huge, so I need to be careful how big I get that I can handle it in here. I'm not quite sure what the biggest painting I can get in and out of here is. Whatever, it'll fit through the doorway, right? That determines how big I can work. So right now I'm limited to that. And if I can't get it out of here, well, then there goes that idea. I mentioned before, I thought about getting a studio space in the little town I live in, little farming town of Springville, New York. They have a very active art scene. And they've renovated an old furniture building, and they're doing different spaces in there for, for studios. And I thought, hey, that's perfect. So we went and looked at it, my wife and I, and it looked okay until I realized I would have to be upstairs. And you have to go up this rickety set of stairs. And I didn't like it. I thought about bringing all my stuff up there, and I thought about bringing my canvases back and forth. And I thought, that's not what I want. So instead, I renovated this downstairs space in my basement. And that's easier. I don't have to leave home. I'm in control. I can paint whenever. If I'm not sleeping at night, and I think, I may as well go down and paint. I could come down here anytime and paint. That looks pretty good, don't it? If I do say so myself. I'm trying to look to see if I need to play dark against light anywhere. And I could, but in case, I like to stop before I start doing what I call fiddling around. That means I'm doing stuff, but I really don't need to. And it's not necessarily improving the painting. I'm just having fun fiddling with it. And I try to quit before I get too much into that, because that's really not, I don't want to kill all the spontaneity. Because there's something to be said for knowing when to quit a painting. Knowing when to look at it and go, that's enough. That's enough for now. Is a painting ever really finished? Well, it depends. Depends on who the artist is. If you're Mr. Da Vinci, Leonardo da Vinci, you might never be done with a painting. He was a perfectionist. He painted very little, finished very little. Had amazing drawings and sketches, and that's really kind of we know where he's going, but he had a little problem finishing. And I wonder, some people say maybe he's ADHD or something, and I don't think it was as much as that. I think the man, for as good as he was, as talented as he was never quite satisfied. He wanted always to go another level. And it's known that some of his paintings, we went years between working on them. So he'd paint it, put it in a corner somewhere, leave it. In fact, the Mona Lisa is one that people have seen and saw in his studio at the time, and he just kind of had it setting off to the side. Who knows why? I mean, he wasn't satisfied with the way it's going, put it away for a while. Yeah, we'll probably come back to it later. Probably would be working on another project, kind of look over and see it, pick it up, and start painting again. They've proven that he had several different versions of that painting. They were able to look underneath and see where he changed things, changed the position of her hands. What else? There were some pillars in there at first. On both sides of her, I believe, there were some pillars up there. It's almost like a goddess kind of a thing. And he got rid of that, didn't care for that. And changed that later. And, that famous smile of hers, of course. I think it's cool that they found some sketches where he was practicing that smile. Love to know why that smile. What he was thinking at the time when he did that. And who knows? The man was obviously a genius. He could do anything. He was a Renaissance man. Painting was just one of the things he could do, and I think he just got bored after a while. I think he would paint, and then just kind of go, let's do something else. And then he would draw whatever he wanted to. Drew pictures of what would become a helicopter, knew how to make it work. Didn't have the materials to make it back when he came up with the idea. There were no materials for helicopters. It didn't exist. So he was kind of stuck there. Couldn't see it to fruition, but had some pretty good drawings. Accurate, you could build the thing from them. So pretty brilliant. And I think of artists that have influenced me. Salvador Dali. I love the way he worked. Kind of kooky character, but I think that was part of the show. He was smart enough to know that with a better personality, he'd sell more art. And he did. He once drew a picture while he was taking a bath, and I guess laughed to his wife, might have been his wife, and said, this will sell for $10,000 or whatever he said, and it did. And he painted it while he was in the bathtub, not even trying. He said, what he's really saying is, because I'm Salvador Dali, it'll sell for $10,000. Smart guy. It is true. Once you hit a few home runs as an artist, your artwork is worth something, even if it's not as good as the things you created before. Not fair in some ways, and of course you have to work hard to get to that point. So art is a lot of fun. I get much enjoyment out of doing this. Some people ask, why do you paint? Just because I like it. It's relaxing to me. I relax when I paint. When I'm painting, I'm thinking of a million different things. I might be painting and I might be thinking of something from the past. I find out a lot. As I paint, memories come through my mind. Good, bad, ugly. You know, just like that movie from Clint Eastwood, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I painted a painting one time when I was in a particularly bad mood, particularly thinking of my past, and, you know, if you know my past story, it's not great. And I wound up just calling it Pain. It's the only painting like it I've ever made. Never made anything even remotely like it again. I gave it to my daughter, Rachel. Actually, her name now is Rain. Rainbow. Cool name, huh? I should name myself something different, too. That's cool. How about Fernando? Fernando the Magician is here. Sounds more exciting than just Dave, huh? I should have thought of that earlier in my career. That's all right. I could have been Fernando. Rainbow's got that painting, and I don't want it back. I painted it. I took all my anger and put it onto the canvas and got rid of it. And that's okay that I got rid of it. Didn't need it anyway. Well, I think that's about done. I really don't need to do anything else with this. I just wanted to touch up a few things. Once again, I've been told there's a... Whoops, sorry, I kicked it. There's a face here, some hands. So this is a lady, her eyeball, kind of her nose in this area. There's a mouth. This is her hand, almost like she's brushing her hair back or something like that. And of course, not intentional. Some of my wife says she's in a pretty dress. That I don't see. I think because I'm doing the artwork and I'm not looking for that. I'm looking for the techniques and the drawing and everything. Well, guys, it's been great painting with you for a while. I will talk to you later. Straighten this up a little bit. I really kicked it hard, didn't I? I will talk to you a little bit later. Thank you so much for spending part of your evening with me.